So is there anybody who has a question that you'd like to ask me now? Go ahead.
I'm wondering, as a child, I grew up with a lot of keeping secrets and lies from very early childhood. And being told that I couldn't share what was going on, the lies weren't anybody's business, including family members. So I grew up with that. And now I'm turning 60 in short time here, and I still have that same complication where my stress levels are maxed out, and yet I cannot find myself able to talk to anyone. I don't have anyone to go to and ask about, what can I do? What can I change? How can I do anything? And even just relieve that. And I was even trained as a Stephen minister and was a listener for other people, giver for other people. But I have a hard time trying to find somebody for myself. What do we do in this time where we all are running crazy and stressed, and we don't know how to find someone that we can talk with? And we were trained that you don't even talk to a psychologist.
Yeah. What's your first name?
Rhonda.
Rhonda, thank you for that revealing and very personal question. I want to say, first of all, that you are not alone. This is very typical that you will have patterns. We have patterns that come from our families, that come from secrets, lies, and those are traumas. Catastrophic things that happen. I mean, terrible thing if a woman dies in labor and the child knows that her mom died because she was born, or her father left during pregnancy. But in your case, and I want to say this for everybody, children, even babies, know what's going on. So our efforts to hide things and make secrets and lies, like not telling a child it's adopted because we didn't want to hurt its feelings, are all working against that child and our best interests. No matter what our purpose was in doing so, secrets and lies are one of the worst things that you could do, even to a baby in the womb. So I'll just give a quick tip for somebody who's pregnant or working with somebody who's pregnant. Tell the truth to the baby in the womb. Say, I didn't intend to get pregnant. It took me a couple of weeks to get used to the idea. I made a decision to keep you, and I'm so glad. Whatever the truth is, Dad and I are having a miserable time. We have for the last 2 weeks. I don't know what's going on, but it's not about you. If somebody had just said that to me, that I could have said to my daughter, it's not about you, sweetie. Your job is to grow and to be happy, and I am the grown-up, and I will take care of this. And it helps us get bigger and make the decision to take care of it ourselves. That's one. Second thing is, typical server people don't get their needs met and often go into serving because their needs weren't met when they were young. So for you, as a woman approaching 60, I'd say join a women's group. This isn't something you need therapy work so much for. You need community. Right. And whether you need it with a group of artists or whether it's a group that's together specifically to share their stories and to do deep listening, I would do a women's group. Does that help?
That does help, yeah.
Thank you. You can't erase the past. You can't alter everything about patterns, but you can shift them. And in some ways, you can redo the childhood.
I did a course, Painting from the Soul, years ago. I think it would be wonderful to
you might do it like again. Yes.
Yes, thank you for the
You're very welcome. Your first name?
Angela.
Angela, hi. It looks like you might be pregnant?
I am 17 and a half weeks, so very early still. But
great. First baby?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was, while you were talking, really thinking about the trauma portion, and childbirth itself is a scary thing to be going into, and how do you limit the trauma exposed to my body and the baby's body when it happens?
Okay, so first of all, shoulders up and relax. Birth is not meant to be traumatic. That's the first thing. It has been designed as an extremely subtle, refined, complex process that works. Now, it works best when the woman is healthy, mind, body, and spirit. And yes, some babies die, and on a rare instance, a woman will die even today. But the majority of complications and the majority of babies that die and women that die for a few very specific reasons. In the developing world, women die because they lose too much blood and they're anemic because their diet isn't sufficient. They die because of infection, because something got in the womb, somebody put their hands in their body, usually it's not a midwife, who didn't clean their hands. Babies or high blood pressure. Those are the three around the world. Now, in modern societies, most of the deaths of mothers and babies are due to either the prematurity of the baby, it's born too soon, and a lot of that is the stress of the mother. Some of it is the environmental toxins, but a lot of it's the mother's stress, and we don't do much to alleviate her stress, and I'll be talking about that in another class and what we can do. But for you, the other problem is the complications that are introduced by medical interventions in birth. And I want to say that because birth is not a disease. Everybody gives lip service to that. It's a healthy, normal female process. Well, then why are we having our babies in a hospital? The place of sick people, the place of disease, the place of infections that antibiotics can't treat. It's for a lot of historical reasons we moved birth into the hospital so that by 1944, the year I was born, more than half the babies in the U.S. were born in hospital. And then it rapidly grew to 98%. And it wasn't until the late 60s that a group of educated women around the country spontaneously started attending their friends' births and then studying to be midwives, and learning from veterinarians, and learning wherever they could from pediatricians, and reading textbooks, because the more they assisted at births of their friends, the more they took on the responsibility. Well, what if something happens? I want to be prepared. So the better shape you're in, mentally, physically, spiritually, coming to this labor, the better for you and the baby growing inside you in pregnancy, and the less chance of complications. You're a healthy woman. And, and this is a wanted baby, right?
It's what?
A wanted baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether or not you started wanting it, this is a wanted baby. So these are the two biggest things to achieve health in birth, and to not birth a premature baby. So stress is the big one. It's not the trauma of labor. It's stress before, and it's entering labor with not enough sleep and not enough pleasure and not enough friends and not knowing what you're going to do afterwards, and hopefully making plans to stay home for at least 6 months. In addition to making plans for having the least intervention in your birth. You're going to birth in a hospital?
That's the plan as of now. I'd love to explore like water births or home births.
Or midwife. So you can think about that. Or midwife in a hospital. But for now, what you want to think about is having a doula at your birth. Someone who takes the pressure off you and the pressure off your partner, because ideally you have a partner, father of the baby, so you're very fortunate. You want somebody who creates a circle of support around you to protect you from outside unnecessary interference. And you can prepare by looking at great films. Don't listen to bad stories. Anybody that's about to tell you a bad story in a grocery line, the answer is,
I don't want to hear it.
I'm carrying a baby and I'm only listening to great stories. Okay? And a lot of walking or swimming, breathing, taking yoga, going to a birth class so you get involved with other people and you're not alone. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And
thank you.
Never lying down in labor. Don't go to the hospital too soon. Don't let anybody induce you. And never lie down in labor. Squat, stand, walk, shower, lean on the bed, lean on your partner, take a bath, sit on the toilet. Lying down is the very worst thing anyone can do in labor because it makes the contractions longer, less effective, and they hurt more.
Yeah, we don't want that.
No, we don't want that. So labor is meant to be this rhythmic, sexual process governed by our hormones, and any drugs you take in labor are going to alter your natural process. So what you really want is touch, love, singing, walking, quiet, Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I hope it makes you feel a little better.
It does.
You're in a culture of fear about birth, so you're not alone.
Yeah, I'm not super scared or anything. But,
Okay.
But
I just want
good
to say if it
advice.
happens again, you get more frightened, then you need to get a good dose of good news.
Yeah.
Call people who had good births.
Exactly.
I'll share my home birth with
Yeah,
you
me
later.
Your first name?
My name's Mary Kate, and I am the opposite. I do not want children
Intentionally.
intentionally.
Good for you.
At all. No, thank you. And I was trying to get on board with my husband because he did. He wanted to be a young dad, and I kept putting it off, and then kind of got him on board with me, since it would mostly be me doing it,
Yeah.
growing this child. But now that other cousins and people have gotten married, I'm fine with my sister and brother who have had children. But one of my husband's cousins just got pregnant with twins, and I had this huge wave of panic, like, oh, people are gonna look at me now, and
Yeah.
my the only reason would be for my mother-in-law, but I don't care that much about that.
Okay.
But I guess just how to know that I'm making the right choice for me, and even with all this other family, his
Right.
side most importantly, I'm fine with my sister. She always wanted kids. But when it comes to his sister or his brother, if they have,
How do you deal with it?
how do I
Okay.
calm myself down from that and be like,
Okay.
no one's really looking at me, no one real, everybody
Right.
knows by now I don't want them, but it's still like that for me.
Okay. So, in some ways, you're similar to your next door neighbor here who's pregnant. You don't want to hear bad stories about women who regretted that they never had children. You do not need any shame or blame, and you're very fortunate to live in a culture that still allows you to make a choice about your body and whether or not you want to have a child. You may end up co-parenting someone else's child. You may, who knows, a child may come into your life who you fall in love with and you're kind of an auntie for. The world does not need lots more children. We do real well, thank you. And we need lots of people making conscious decisions not to have babies. Unfortunately, often the women who are more conscious are choosing not to have children than men, than a lot of people who are getting pregnant by accident and not really prepared or having dealt with the fact that they're having a baby. And it could be a teenager, it could be a 38-year-old businesswoman. They're having a baby to fill a place in their life that's empty. They want a baby to love them. Or they have a vision of having 3 children in those 3 bedrooms they have in that huge house. Can be anybody. So I think the big thing is to ward off any feelings of guilt or shame that a culture places on you, and recognize and remind people, I'm one of the fortunate women in the world who can make an intentional decision on whether or not to grow a baby in my body. And I thank heavens that I'm born at this time in history. And I hope that you, anybody you know who's having a baby, is having a baby because they're really ready and have consciously planned for it. So I'm doing my bit for world peace. Just say something like that, and it's like, what? What did she just say?
There's 7.5 billion people in this world.
And we're going up to 11 soon, yes. So, thank you so much. Yes. Your name, come stand up.
My name's Dennis.
Hi, Dennis.
I was adopted back in the 40s from a mother who was out of wedlock and got put up for adoption through Lutheran welfare. I apparently pretty soon adopted by parents who loved me and cared for me. It was kind of like a trial thing because they were older parents. And I was always told, yes, you're adopted. and it wasn't something that was
No
kept a
secret.
secret, right? And so I did grow up earlier in a loving, caring atmosphere. There were some things happening by junior high and stuff where there was a lot of arguing and yelling and stuff like that within the family, but they stayed together through that time. And I also had a sister who was adopted, and she was like 2.5 years younger than I. And we were raised like we were part of the family. At this time in my life, at 73, could that have had anything to do with how I react for my PTSD from Vietnam War? Because I did have a lot of trauma there, not as much as some, but everybody acts differently within their own mind or head in different ages. And
So the trauma piece kind of struck a bell.
the trauma did, and the resilience part.
Ah,
With the PTSD, I guess I've had a hard time associating or making relative communication, closeness, and I've kind of stayed away from things that bothered me.
we talked about avoidance, right?
And, like going into a store and having a lot of people behind you, you go down an aisle and you go, no, I don't want to be here. I'm not comfortable.
So being comfortable in the world at your age is still a challenge.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's part of PTSD. Do you want me to talk about this a little?
Yeah, I'd like to say one other thing.
Sure.
Through my therapy and stuff that I'm doing with the VA, we talked about it quite a bit, and it's like up until now, we were existing.
Yeah.
And so now, as we're later in life, that existing part has gone away, and I want to live. And all we know how to do is exist.
Got it.
So now I'm having to learn how to live. And yes, if you have some insight on that, I would really love to hear it.
Thank you. Your first name again?
Dennis.
Dennis. I want to say a couple of things. First of all, it is not uncommon for PTSD signs to show up later in life. But the roots are always early. The roots always have to do with how resilient did this child get to be, and what happened in the womb, a conception at birth in the first year, always has a lot to do with it. And in your case, you were carried in the womb of a woman who relinquished you for whatever reasons. It could have been by pressure, it could have been by choice, she could have been ambivalent about relinquishing you, she could have been certain, she could have allowed herself to love you, or she could have distanced herself from you. There are many different kinds of experiences relinquished kids have in the womb, but it is 9 months of growing in that mother. You spent how much time before they got to take you home?
I'm thinking around 4 to 6 months.
Okay, or at least some weeks.
Or some weeks. Yeah.
Okay, so you were probably in a hospital nursery, if not a foster care setting, for at least a few weeks. That's another experience. And not all babies come in with the same innate amount of resilience. Some babies bond to the next people who are really good. Some of them don't. Some of them stay resistant. You've had different challenges in your life as a father, and now what you're presenting with is you want to live. You don't want to just survive and cope.
That's true.
Whew, so, and if it's okay that I say this, I'm seeing a lot of tears in your face about, just about to flood. My hunch is you weren't safe to do lots of expressing your pain and your sadness, your anger, whatever you might have been feeling as a little baby or a child, because you were busy trying to please your parents, which adoptees tend to do. Unless they're acting out, they're pleasing. And then you were a father raising all these different kids and being their Rock of Gibraltar. So where did Dennis get to be? Well, he got to be a man who's carrying an enormous amount of trauma for good reason. And in some ways, I would see the need that you have now, although you're already part of groups that,
Yes.
so you're very fortunate there are vets groups for PTSD. I would suggest a group called the Mankind Project, which is not religious based, but it is deeply based in the belief that men can grow into full human beings with the support of each other, calling each other on their lies and fabrications and being totally supportive of them growing into their full human potential. It's called the Mankind Project. If not that, I think you may simply want to spend some time reflecting upon yourself as a baby in the womb and as a baby who was relinquished. That's a huge piece of trauma, and people carry that. And whether or not the adoptive parents or the foster parents are wonderful people. And as I say, kids come in with a different amount of innate resilience and trust. And then that is often damaged by the kinds of experiences they go through. So just naming what you want out of your life, which is you want to really live now. You want to thrive. You don't want to just cope.
Right.
You're going to find your way. It's like you've pointed yourself in that direction. People and things will come to you that you can say yes or no to that will be what you need as you go on this journey. It's like you've made the biggest step of all.
Like I don't have to say yes because
You don't have to say yes to anything anymore. You're no longer the householder and provider. You get to be Dennis. It's a privilege.
and during one of my stressful areas, instead of going to the bar, which I could have easily done, I focused on mountain biking.
On?
And mountain biking.
Good.
So there were times when I was so frustrated that I would get on there and I'd just ride and ride and ride
Wow.
until I was exhausted,
Good for you.
which is what I needed.
I should have mentioned it. You did, and it's perfect. Now, first responders, firefighters, and others who come to scenes of accidents and under huge floods of adrenaline and cortisol are told they must do vigorous exercise within 24 hours for a full hour, bring it to a sweat in order to discharge, like animals do, to get it out of their body. So stay out in nature whenever you can. Talk to a tree. Let the tree feel your grief. Thank you.
What if it talks back?
If it talks back, you're one of the fortunate. Although now we know trees live in community. And some trees are in communities that are hundreds of miles across and give nourishment to each other when one of the trees is failing from lack of nourishment. We're just learning about how incredibly subtle and complex nature is at providing for its own. Thank you. Yes, your first name.
Oh, I'm Scott.
Oh, you go first, Scott. Go ahead.
Oh, wait, she won.
No.
She can go first.
Yeah, but she wants you to go first. Go for it.
I'm Scott. I have more of an observation that you can comment on than a question. I just came back in August from 4 years in Africa. Worked in 3 different orphanages, one in southeastern Tanzania, one in northern Mozambique, and one in central South Africa.
Wow.
And you mentioned in your teaching that that you talked about the woman at the garbage dump in Brazil that had more dignity and her child was more well adjusted than most American women at the same stage.
Yes.
I see that firsthand all the time. I see children that, in our thinking, should be totally and completely crushed and broken because they're living in garbage dumps because war has robbed them of parents or some other thing, AIDS or some disease has robbed them of parents, and and we go in and we rescue them. And what I find is they have much more. They have better coping. They're more resilient. They have greater dignity than 90% of the people I know in American society.
Yeah.
And I just thought you might want to comment.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I do not want to generalize and say that any woman living on a garbage dump is fine or any woman living in starving conditions in Africa is fine. Right,
Yeah.
There is trauma, and for some it is too much, and babies miscarry as a result or choose not to be here as a result. And there are cases where people who come from fairly intact villages are now being assaulted by so many traumas. Starvation, loss of land, AIDS being 3 of them, death all around, that the natural fabric of that culture, of that village society, just collapses under it. And you find women who used to birth safely at home and even parented 8 kids, 10 kids, are now going to the hospital and leaving their baby behind and walking away because they know they do not have enough food to feed even the other children. So I don't want to make it sound like people in tribal parts of the world, developing parts, have it easier, as you said, but there is an innate resilience that seems to come from generation upon generation of living in community. The community bears a lot of the sorrow, and the community shares a lot of the joy. And it is one of the things that Mother Teresa remarked on, the loneliness of people in modern society, modern industrial, post-industrial, wealthy societies, that many other people haven't dealt with because they're still bonded. And I'm going to talk more and more about what this bond is, this attachment that starts, or should start, right at conception. So thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for your observations and for your respect of these cultures, and not figuring that you're going in just rescuing them, but really seeing what they have to offer you and me as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and your name?
Hi, my name is Molly. I just wanted to comment about my situation. The beginning of my pregnancy, I was probably stressed or depressed, a lot of anxiety going on throughout the pregnancy. But then once I had the baby, we had a home birth, and he breastfed and slept with us, and I did a lot of attachment parenting. The birth went really well. It was only about 6.5 hours. It was much easier than what people talk about, and it was really lovely. And I was also just getting support from some friends at that time. And my son and I were able to bond. And you can see it now, even though throughout his life there's different periods of time where there was a lot of stress. I just had this feeling that he breastfed until he was 4. After 2, it was only once a day just to go to bed. But he breastfed for a long time, and he slept with me. And we really communicated well, and I wasn't at work without him because I would bring him. And so there was a lot of time together. And so I think that healed those things and made up for all of the anxiety and stress and the trauma that was going on throughout his life.
How old is he now?
He's 21, and he's really healthy in relationships. He's much healthier than me or his father or I were in relationships. He's very good at communicating, and he's bonds with other people. He makes friends of all different ages and types, and he's a very loving person.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's nice to have you share a positive story that includes some real travail. Pregnancy was not all that easy, and it was not so easy, and then you end with your partner, and then you ended up separating and being a single mom, right? Mm-hmm. From early on, but you had a great birth. You sought out a natural birth?
Yeah.
And you intentionally breastfed for as long as possible and co-slept. Mm-hmm. And probably did a lot of skin to skin, naked skin to skin when he was very young. Mm-hmm. Those things are being scientifically found to be absolutely, I mean, they're like premium important in wiring the brain, creating a strong immune system, creating a really deep connection and bond in a mother and baby being completely attuned to each other, and in healing early trauma. Whether that early trauma was rape, in your case obviously not, it was a wanted pregnancy, whether that was a high-stress pregnancy, which yours was, whether it even was a cesarean birth or a high-stress birth with a baby in the ICU for a week, which yours was not. But these 3 things, full and long breastfeeding, co-sleeping or having the baby within 3 feet of your body, so it's feeling your heartbeat, as it does within 3 feet, and it's the beat-to-beat variability of the heart of a baby changes completely and goes into a pattern called chaos when a mother is separated more than 3 feet from her baby after birth. And that happens for a long time, that the mother and baby are one system. I'll talk about this in other classes. And then the fact that you breastfed up until 4 and you co-slept for a long time?
Until he was like 8 or 9.
Wonderful. And yet he's very independent-minded?
Yeah, he always has been.
So there is remediation. It's so much easier if healing occurs soon after trauma. And breastfeeding and co-sleeping, even if it's not bed sharing or near bed sharing. And did you circumcise?
No.
And not circumcising is another piece. He was not subjected to that trauma, because it is trauma and we now understand that. It makes a huge difference, and all of the skin-to-skin time. So, bravo, and this should be a model for other people who've had 1, 2, 3 things go wrong that made them feel, oh gee, I've lost. No, it's not lost. It's just that it's easier the earlier we deal with it. And thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate you all. I hope that you'll talk with others more openly about some of the things that you've taken away from this. Tell them about this series, because it's going to be online and available to anyone. And that you'll start to think about the word attachment, which is sometimes called bonding, and what it really meant in our lives, and how those very earliest times as we are growing in our mother's womb, from conception to birth, and then the first year and the birth itself, really helped shape the patterns that have dominated your life for good or ill. And knowing that, you can now do more. Thank you.
Thank you.